Hey guys, it's Blake here. I'm going to take a few minutes and attempt to show you how to carve just your basic eye and nose, and kind of set up the cheek area and stuff for a Santa Claus. The first thing I'm doing here on the block is I'm identifying where the eye sockets are going to be and then where the bottom of the nose is going to be. What I'm doing is I'll take just a regular rough out knife, cut down at an angle where that line is, and then undercut it so that that chip pops out, which creates the area for the bottom of the nose. I'll try to clean up as I go and make it deep enough to where you have plenty of room underneath the nose to cut in the mustache. Next thing I'm doing here is I use a number 9 gouge to gouge out the eye sockets. That basically just sets up the foundation of where the eyes are going to be. I'll start out by cutting those fairly shallow just to identify where they're going to be, and then I'll come back and cut them in probably 3 or 4 more times. I apologize for my hand being in the way of the video. I kind of carve backwards away from my body compared to everybody else, so I apologize in advance for my hand getting in the way. What I'm doing here is I'm setting up the brow line so that I can scoop out the nose up through the brow, so that nose has kind of a scoop shape to it. You want the nose kind of turned up. You don't want it straight or flat, and so that's really created by scooping it in and running it all the way up to the brow. Here I am going back in again with that number 9 gouge and just putting back in those grooves for the eye sockets. And again, you'll be able to tell that this kind of goes in steps, how I set this up. I'll use the knife to thin down the outside of the nose, thin down that area underneath those sockets. Again, continue to establish where the nose goes and how it's going to be set up. Right now I'm cutting in the 45 wings underneath the nose, and again, just cleaning up on the sides. So the next thing I'll do is I'll probably knock the tip of the nose off, again just so it's not pointy, and I'll continue to scoop that out all the way up to the brow line. Again, that scooping motion is what allows that nose to kind of turn up and not be so flat back into the forehead. If I were doing a Santa Claus, of course, there at the top of the brow would be where the hat comes down, so I would be carving that into where the hat is. And once again, using the number 9 to cut those eye sockets in deeper. Just want to keep those separated. Where I continue to cut up through the brow line, I have to put those marks back in with my gouge. Again, clean it up on the side of the nose. Just don't want the nose to be too wide. And just cleaning up some of the cut marks from where the piece of wood was originally cut out. Just more cleanup here. And more scoop cuts. I usually try to clean up as I go, so you'll notice that I go back and cut areas that I've already cut in just to make sure that they're clean and that there's not a whole lot of fuzzies and stuff underneath there. So the next thing I do here, turn it over, kind of scoop some of that nose out again. If I cut it too wide, I'll go back and cut it up into the cheek area so that it's kind of matching up with the other side. Next thing I want to do is I'll grab a pencil here and I'm going to mark the width of the nose. And basically that runs from the outside corner of the nose up to the inside corner of the eye socket. And I'll use a soft V to cut that in. I run it from the corner of the nose all the way up into the eye socket, and then I'll just knock that out of there Basically what I'm doing is I'm thinning the nose, but I'm also setting up where the corner of the eye is going to be, and I'll cut that corner of the eye in with a micro gouge. So you'll see me come back in with a micro gouge and kind of clean that up. Right now I'm just using my soft V to kind of clear it out of there. And again, that establishes the width of the nose. I'll use my knife to come back in and kind of clean that mark up so that it is smooth up through there and not a big groove from the U part of the soft V. So now I'm cutting in beside the nose and underneath the nose, and I'm going to take that triangle chip out. That will establish the smile line. It'll create a shadow underneath the nose, and that's actually where I will run the cheek line off of when I'm doing a Santa Claus. And I'll do that on both sides, so I'll try to match that up on the other side. And again, you don't want to cut too high because you don't want to cut part of that nose off. So I'm being careful to make sure that I cut it in the right spot. One, to make it come out clean, and two, to make sure that it matches up to the other side. Again, some more cleanup work. And now I'm using a V tool, and I'm going to run that V tool up from the corner of the nose back up into the corner of the eye. And again, that just narrows that nose a little more and establishes where the nose is going to be and separates it away from the cheek some. You'll see the mess there in the eyes. I'll just knock that out of there, and I'll use a micro gouge to come back in and kind of clean that out. Again, when you're carving eyes, the deepest part of the eye is in the inside corner of the eye and then the outside corner of the eye. So I use this micro gouge to set up the eye socket before I ever carve eyes in on my Santa Clauses and my caricatures both. So here I am just cleaning that out, and basically what I'm doing is I'm carving in a V. So I come from the bottom up to the corner and from the top down to the corner and just chip that out of there. Again, that'll deepen the area beside the nose and also establish the deep part of the nose. Here I'm using a number 9, running it between the brow up to where the hat area would be, and chipping that out. Basically what that will do is it will allow me to establish where the eyebrows are going to be. So I'm separating those eyebrows using that number 9 gouge. And I'll just use my knife to kind of clean all that up. And again, this is the roughing in stage, so I'll continue to clean it up and narrow everything down to kind of get it where I want it. Again, I apologize for my hand being in the way here. I'm just deepening those eye gouges, or those the eye socket area, taking it on out to the corner of the face, just to kind of establish the outside of the eye. Plus I need that cut in so that I can go back in and carve my eye in. Clean up underneath the nose again. Now what I want to do is I'm going to determine where the outside of the eye is, and again I'm going to use this micro gouge to cut in a V on the outside corner. It's similar to the inside corner. And then what I'll do is I'll take that micro gouge and I'll start in the middle of where the eyeball is, and I'll round from the middle towards the nose and then from the middle to the outside of the eye, and that creates that ball in that socket there. So you can kind of see there it's a little messy because of the ridge lines from the gouge, but it's basically creating an area there that's kind of rounded over so that you can carve your eyeball in there. If you don't set it up this way, a lot of times the eye looks flat. You're not able to get the detail that you need to get to try to create some of that realism. Now I'll do it on the same side,
Okay.
or on the opposite side, using the same gouge, and I'll set it up the same way. Right now I'm carving in deep next to the nose, popping that chip out of there. And then I'm measuring the other eye to try to make this, the second eye, about the same size. And I just estimate about the size that is. Cut in my V on the outside with that soft, or that micro gouge, popping that chip out, and then I'll round that ball over. And again, this is all rough. It doesn't have to be very smooth, because you're going to come back in and you're going to clean all that up once you carve your eye in. All I'm doing now is just blending it into the outside of the face. I'll come back in a little while and carve in a cheek there so that you can kind of see how I do the Santa Clauses. And then I'll use a large gouge to cut in the temple area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come off the cheek, and I'm going to come around and up to the area where the hat would be to cut in my cheek. You'll see there, I basically come off the corner of that chip area where the nose meets the cheek, and I run it around by the eye and up to the hat. And I'm just cleaning out that cut area that I used that V tool to cut that in with. And so right there next to the eye, what I'll use is I'll use a large gouge, and I'll come in where that eye socket stops, and I'll cut that out, or punch that out to the corner of that area that I just cut in, and chip that out. Basically what that does is that narrows down that temple area. Again, do some more cleanup work. Constantly cleaning up the carving just to get some of the fuzzies out. Try to keep it as clean as possible as you go. I'm using the number 9 gouge again to kind of open the eye more and to clean it out. And again, just working on the brow area just a little bit, cleaning it up. I'm just going to do one side of the face, so you'll see how I do the eye. I'm going to cut that in by cutting in a straight cut right by the nose. And then at the top of that straight cut, I'm going to come across the top, where the top of the eye would be, and then I slope down into the outside corner. Hopefully you can see that there. And we'll take out the chip in the upper corner where that side cut and that top cut comes together, chipping that out. And then I'm rounding up to the upper eyelid. I'll turn the carving over to round it up. And then what I'll do from there is I'll go from the bottom of that straight cut next to the nose out to the outside corner of the eye. And I'll make 2 or 3 easy cuts because that's quick to break out. And then I'll chip out that outside corner, and I'll round down to that bottom eyelid. And that's a quick eye. And again, you can kind of see there how the eyeball is rounded over in that socket instead of just being flat. I'll do some more cleanup on the nose. Take more scoop cuts out just to turn that up a little bit more. Clean it up underneath the cheek area. Then I'll use that micro gouge again. I'm going to come in underneath the eye and cut in a gouge area, which is kind of like a wrinkle. And I'm going to swoop it around to create the bag underneath the eye and come up to the outside of that eyeball. And that creates the bag underneath the eye. And I'll use my knife and come in underneath that and just kind of clean that up a little bit so that that bag kind of pops out. So next I'm going to cut the nostrils in on the nose. I'll use that large gouge once again to cut the nostrils in. Usually the nose is a little bigger than what it is on this piece, but I still use the same gouge. What I'll do is I'll cut my gouge marks in first, making sure that they kind of match up on both sides, cleaning them up after I cut the gouge marks in. And once they're where they should be, or where they look right, then I'll come back underneath there and I'll cut out a triangle inside of each one of those gouge marks, which will be the opening for the inside of the nose or the nostrils. Again, I'm using my gouge just to try to do some cleanup and try to make them match. And then I come back in and I cut the triangle out underneath the nose to create that hole there where the opening of the nose is. You can kind of see there how that works. I would do that on both sides. So again, after doing some cleanup, I come back in. We'll use a small V-tool to cut over top of that eye to cut the upper eyelid in. I will use a micro gouge to come back and cut in hair on that eyebrow. And once I get that done, that's pretty much the basics of how I carve in a face. On this video, I didn't get into doing the mustache and the mouth, didn't get into cutting in beards and hair. But this should give you a start as far as how the eyes and nose is established, how the cheeks are cut in, and you know, how some of the basic features are put on one of my carvings. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to help. Again, Blake Lunsford, happy carving, and I hope to see you out on the carving circuit real soon. Thanks.